Russian forces ratcheted up their attack on Kharkiv, the second largest city in Ukraine. According to the Ukrainian government, dozens were killed and hundreds wounded, though it's unclear how many, if any, were civilians. A U.S. defense official has claimed Belarus may soon send its own troops to aid Russia. Meanwhile, the U.S. has sent more aid and weapons to Ukraine as part of a new package from the White House. Western intelligence suggests Russia may have, quote, slowed down its offensive over the weekend in the city of Kiev due to logistical problems and heavy resistance from civilians. Though the Russian government claims the slowdown was intentional.
Ми вже видаємо зброю і будемо видавати для захисту нашої землі всім бажаючим, всім спроможним захищати наш суверенітет.
Although Russia is yet to fully seize any major city, many analysts warn the Russian offensive is steadily continuing. Meanwhile, sanctions from Western powers have caused the Russian ruble to plunge as much as 40%. Long lines were seen outside Russian ATMs over the weekend, and an unusual departure from its history of neutrality, Switzerland has also frozen Russian assets. Ukraine also formally applied today to join the EU, and typically neutral nations of Sweden and Finland have held emergency summits under speculation they may be considering joining NATO. And negotiators from Russia and Ukraine have agreed to hold potential peace talks near the Ukrainian border with Belarus. Though Ukrainian President Zelenskyy noted he was not optimistic, and as of this afternoon, it seemed like there was little progress in the talks. We've seen an outpouring of videos and posts on social media about developments on the ground, some more accurate than others. And it's given reporters a unique level of insight into how the invasion progresses, from Twitter threads showing tanks moving towards the border, to Google data maps showing traffic patterns that reflected Russian roadblocks ahead of the invasion. Now, we're going to bring in Newsy correspondent Jake Godin, who heads up our award-winning visual investigation series, Newsy plus Bellingcat. Jake, you've been following things closely in Ukraine. What kinds of attacks are we seeing right now, and where are civilians being targeted?
While we initially saw a lot of attacks against what were supposed to be military targets, like airports and some other bases, we're now starting to see a lot of attacks against civilians, specifically a lot of cluster munition strikes against populated areas. And we've seen people with their homes where they have giant holes in the ceiling and there's a big old rocket booster or something just kind of sitting in the floor and there's water coming out of the ceiling. Or we're also seeing images of people who are, staying in the subway and metro centers in order to stay safe. So it's a lot of indiscriminate shelling kind of going on now.
Well, so many of these images are so disturbing. How has the world responded specifically to civilian casualties?
The United Nations has said that protecting civilians is priority number one. So far, on Saturday, they reported that there's been 240 civilian casualties and 64 deaths, but the number is likely much, much higher than that. Already today, we're seeing from that shelling in Kharkiv, we're seeing what are likely to be a high amount or the death toll is likely to be pretty high.
Yeah. And then along with those images that are so disturbing, they're being shared online. We're seeing so much of what's happening on the front lines in Ukraine being shared on the internet, social media. Talk to us a little bit about this sort of visual world that we currently live in.
Well, if you've been paying attention, especially since the Syrian conflict started, kicking off with essentially people sharing images. People were posting stuff on Facebook. They were posting stuff on Twitter. It's happened in plenty of places since then. Ethiopia, with their war in Tigray, there's been a lot of videos and whatnot shared on social media. And in Armenia, Azerbaijan conflict, there was a lot of social media sharing of videos that were shot by soldiers or people. I mean, that's the thing is these days, everybody has a camera in their pocket. Everybody has phones, and these phones are able to record pretty well, pretty good video. And with Ukraine, there was already a pretty robust community of people watching that conflict, watching what was going on in Ukraine because of what happened in 2014 with the shoot down of MH17 and the annexation of Crimea and then the Eastern Ukraine Donbass stuff. So it's all those people are now getting these updates and kind of, sharing what they're seeing and, verifying this information. So,
well, Jake, you've been keeping your eye on this as close as anybody. thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Many people are trying to leave Ukraine and find safety elsewhere. According to the United Nations, more than 500,000 people have fled Ukraine since the start of the Russian invasion, many of them to Poland, which shares more than 300 miles of border with Ukraine. Newsy correspondent Jason Bellini is in Rzeszów, a town in southeastern Poland. Jason, can you describe what the situation has been like on the ground where you are?
Thanks, Andrew. Well, I'd describe it first as tragic. I saw just today people picking through piles of clothing that had been left there as charity for folks, and people were looking for coats to wear after sometimes spending 4 days waiting at the border, some of them outside who've been on foot, and one can only imagine what it was like for them to wait there in the frigid cold night after night. It's a tragic situation for all these people, but there's also moments of uplift that you see. There are people who are descending on the border of Poland from all over Europe. I met some Germans today who were there offering rides. They said they had room for 4 people that they could take to Germany. Most people are getting away from this border area as soon as they cross, whether it be by bus that's being provided. And Andrew, the other thing that I was eyewitness to was people who are going back into Ukraine, and I'll tell you who they are. They are people who are going there to fight. They're heeding the call of Ukraine's president saying, we need people from all over the world. Doesn't matter if you've had military experience, just come, just show up, we'll give you a gun, you can help us fight off the Russians. And there are quite a few people who are doing that. I mean, there's a steady flow, but it's quite an extraordinary moment here at the border, and we're only expecting more people to be coming through as the line continues to grow and grow. The real humanitarian crisis is on the other side of the border, inside of Ukraine, where people are scared, they're hungry, they're very cold, and they're waiting for, they don't know how long before their opportunity comes to get out of Ukraine. Back to you, Andrew.
Thank you, Jason. At the busiest border crossing into Poland, lines can stretch for miles as families wait for days, trapped in cars as they flee Ukraine. Our partners at the Washington Post take us to the border to bring you accounts from these families who are still waiting to get out and still in mourning over what's left behind.
Ми прокинулись зранку 24 числа і зрозуміли, що ми просто зібрали речі, що було під рукою, і вирушили. Нема. Його нема. Ми просто їдемо, ми просто дивимося новини, що наші відбиваються, молимося і їдемо. В 9-й вечора буде 3 доби. Ми зараз їдемо з чоловіком, у мене чоловік ззаді спить. Він нас проводить прямо до кордону, а сам повертається до Львова. Я не хотіла їхати. Я б його не лишила. Але чоловік настояв, що ми їдемо в Польщу, у нас є там друзі. І я зможу пробути там з дитиною, певний час. Життя дитини дорожче. Вона знає, що таке війна, що Путін стріляє мирне населення, що він хоче забрати нашу землю, наш будинок, все те, що в неї було. Путін – це зло. Все. Ми переможемо. Ми хочемо додому. Ми хочемо додому.
Їдемо 3 сутки. Стоїмо дуже довго в дорозі, харчі вже закінчилися. Спали трошки ходили, бо дітки мусили вже більші, мусили трошки їм місце зробити і мучилися так. Є волонтери, які підвозять хліб, воду, все, що потрібне. Діткам памперси, харчування маленьким діткам. Тривога дуже і переживаю не так, як за себе, а переживаю за дітей. Ні, я не піддаюся, все ж таки ми любимо свою державу, свою країну. Ми живемо на своїй квітучій, красивій землі і ми не зламні, нас не зламати, ми є Україна і Україна понад усе.
У нас 8 людей в машині. Ми готові, тому що там там вже жити нема де. Ну там все вже розбомбили. Будемо шукати. У нас є родичі за кордоном. Будемо їхати туди, не хочеться бути добузою. Будемо шукати роботу, бо я інженер по спеціальності. Дружина в мене теж, вона лаборант, науковці, так що. Ну, краще постояти, чим бути мертвим.
Thanks so much to the Washington Post for that reporting. Russia's invasion of Ukraine has dominated social news feeds around the world in recent days. And against the backdrop of the wider conflict, there have been a few smaller stories that captured the attention of millions online. We're running through a few of those and following up on a few things you might have seen trending. We'll start with an update from Snake Island. It sits about 30 miles off the southern tip of the Ukrainian mainland in the northwestern Black Sea. A group of Ukrainian soldiers who first got the world's attention last week with a candid and you can call it colorful response to Russian warships as they approached the island were thought to have been killed. But on Monday, news came that the 13 Ukrainian soldiers are actually still alive. According to the Ukrainian Navy, they fought until they were forced to surrender because of lack of ammunition. According to the Russian media, they were taken as prisoners of war. With Ukraine under siege, the country's president, Volodymyr Zelenskyy, has become a bit of an international folk hero, including on social media. Zelenskyy has spoken candidly about Ukraine's fight against the Russian invasion, from posting a camera phone video of himself walking the streets on the capital of Kiev, to telling world leaders that he needs ammunition and not a ride out of the country. In light of Russian President Vladimir Putin's efforts to frame the invasion around the rights of ethnic Russians in eastern Ukraine and ridding Ukraine of alleged Nazis, Zelenskyy has pointed to the fact that he grew up in Ukraine and is Jewish himself, with relatives who died in the Holocaust. Other parts of Zelenskyy's background have also gotten the online world's attention. He was a comedian who starred in a Ukrainian TV show about a school teacher whose rants go viral online and then gets elected an unlikely president of Ukraine. After that, life imitated art as Zelenskyy launched his first run for office and was elected as the real-life president of Ukraine in 2019. International sports have been a big part of Russia's messaging to the world. In the past decade, Russia has hosted both the 2014 Winter Olympic Games and the 2018 FIFA World Cup. But after Russia's invasion of Ukraine, there's some fallout on the soccer pitch. On Monday, FIFA penalized Russia, issuing an indefinite ban on Russia playing, including kicking the country out of qualifying for this year's World Cup. It comes a day after FIFA blocked Russia from hosting matches or using the Russian name, flag, or national anthem while competing. Some European countries felt FIFA's original punishment wasn't harsh enough. UEFA, the European Soccer Association, already stripped Russia of its right to host this year's prestigious Champions League final match. From hosting competitions to owning prestigious team, Russians play a big part in the soccer world. Where does the game go from here? Newsy correspondent Ben Shamiso has more.
International soccer is banning Russian teams from all competitions. The move comes after soccer fans and players across Europe rallied in support of Ukraine.
This is the biggest thing we've ever seen in sport, to be honest, and I do expect other sports now to follow suit.
Soccer is followed religiously by hundreds of millions, and protests on and off the field can be a lot more than symbolic.
That means that Russia, the men's and the women's teams, will not be competing in huge football tournaments.
Besides, Russia has spent years investing in international and European soccer, a source of pride and propaganda device for President Vladimir Putin.
I was a reporter based in Moscow for 6 weeks during the World Cup in 2018, and I could see just how much football meant to that country and to Vladimir Putin.
A matchup between Russia and Poland has been on the books for next month in a qualifying game for the Men's World Cup. But following Russia's invasion of Ukraine, Poland has refused to play against Russia under any circumstances.
Of course, Russian footballers are not at fault here, but this country has to face the consequences.
In an earlier ruling, the sport's governing body FIFA had said Russia needed to compete in neutral territory with the country's name, flag and anthem banned. But Poland and other European countries strongly rejected that initial decision. Already, St. Petersburg has been stripped of hosting the Champions League final, the most prestigious club match in European football. The game will now take place in Paris instead.
I think it inconceivable that major international football tournaments can take place in Russia after, as I say, the invasion of a sovereign country.
In other moves, European soccer clubs like Manchester United and Schalke are ending sponsorship deals with Russian companies. Meanwhile, Russian billionaire Roman Abramovich has handed over control of Premier League club Chelsea for now to its charitable foundation. Ben Chamiso, Newsy.
Thank you for that, Ben. Soccer isn't the only sport struggling with what to do when it comes to Russia. The International Olympic Committee announced Monday that it is recommending athletes from Russia and Belarus be banned from international competition. It follows actions from individual sports governing bodies against Russia. Boxing's 4 global organizations announced over the weekend that they would not sanction any fights in Russia, and Formula One canceled this year's Russian Grand Prix after drivers threatened to boycott the race.